Hello, friends. Welcome to Logistics of Logistics podcast. My name is Joe Lynch. Thank you so much for joining us today. Today's topic is the Margin Compression Playbook, the essential strategies for brokerage survival with my friend Kevin Hill. How's it going, Kevin?
I'm doing great. I'm doing great as always, Joe. It's always great to be back here at the Logistics of Logistics, the first podcast I was ever on. I think your second episode too.
It was my second episode. So the first one, my first episode with Steve Elwell, who's not in logistics. He's a friend of mine. He's a consultant. And he was a guinea pig. So were you, of course. I told you ahead of time. And you were like, I don't know what a podcast is, but I'll go on.
And then the audio proves that it was the early days. I don't know if you could even find that anywhere, but
we have some
available. Mishaps on the audio.
Yeah, we learned. There's no way to get good at either writing or podcasting, anything like this without, and not to say I'm great now, but there was a learning curve.
You got to enjoy the learning curve, right? I think that's one of the lessons I've learned in life is you have to enjoy the learning curve, all the mishaps, all the failures, and not worry about perfection whatsoever. Just go out and do it and have fun.
Our friend Blythe Broomleaf told me, she was just on the radio, and I think she did some TV stuff too. I remember she said, I was on the radio and I couldn't stand to listen to myself. I was like, okay, that makes some sense. I've been there. She said, so I wouldn't listen to the episodes. And she goes, I couldn't do it. I was the same way starting out. And now I just love the sound of my voice. Anyway, today, I'm looking forward to interviewing you today, Kev. So please introduce yourself and your companies and where you're calling from today.
Yeah, so my name's Kevin Hill. I'm calling from Dallas, Texas. And so I've been in the industry about 12, 13 years now. I started off as a freight broker, founded Carrierless, worked at Freightway, was a director of research and head of media over there for a couple of years, left there and started Brush Pass Research, which is intel and leads generation for the freight brokerages for freight tech companies and other vendors selling into the industry. And recently, about 3 months ago, I got another day job, and that is head of sales at Carrier Source. And what we're doing there is shipper intent data. So it's real time information on shippers searching for carriers and capacity. And it's just great sales lead data.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. So you mentioned Brush Pass Research. What problem do you solve for your customers in that business? And who are your customers in that business?
Yes, so those are mostly freight tech companies, right? Or factoring companies, insurance companies, people selling to freight brokers, right? It's a large industry, right? They do about $140 billion in gross revenue. There's 25,000 active freight brokerages, much less than the pandemic. We've been hitting some hard times on that. Out of those 25,000, there's about 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 that are viable for people with large ticket or expansive technologies to be able to really sell into that. Those are the ones with the scale. It's hard to identify. It's a murky, opaque market. So I've detailed that industry, who the decision makers are in there, and it's a data pool that people can use to go out and accelerate the sales cycle.
Yep. Kev, I remember talking to you just before you started Brush Pass Research, and you were saying something along the lines, I think I'm going to go and document where all the shippers are. And I think there's 20,000 shippers that do over 10 million. I'm going to become the ultimate source of that. And I was like, oh, I like it. And then I talked to you a few weeks later, and you said, I'm going to capture all the freight brokers. And I remember at first thinking, who wants to know? But what's happened in this industry over the last decade or 2 decades is all of a sudden there's a whole bunch of tech companies that want to sell to freight brokers. And it's not just tech companies with transportation management systems and all sorts of visibility. There's also the load boards and the freight fraud, all sorts of tech, all sorts of companies where they might be Silicon Valley based, or at least a tech company that doesn't fully understand the market. So what you've been creating at Brush Pass Research was very necessary. And then I think also, we'll get into more detail about this, the freight brokerage business has become very top heavy now, where we have the big dogs are growing their share faster and they have an increasingly large piece of the pie. Everyone wants to sell to those, but there's still a lot of them, and they're not all household names. Some are the C.H. Robinson, the TQL, where you can find them easily. You can find them on the top 100 list. That's not everybody.
Either they are not household names, right? So you probably have, let's say, a couple thousand that own about 85% of all those gross revenues, right? Say 150 billion a year in gross revenue in freight brokerage. The top 2,000, top 3,000, let's say, they own 90% of that. So it's very top heavy, and those aren't household names whatsoever. TQL, JB Hunt, you can RXO is public. Coyote is now RXO, so you can't throw out Coyote. But there's a myriad of freight brokers. Are they doing 50 million? Are they doing 150 million? Are they doing 10 million? There's no real good data out there, and that's what I wanted to put together. It makes very interesting charts and
Everyone I've
graphs.
talked to who I've directed your way is always, oh, that's exactly what I need. Because there are a lot of techies who are saying, I'm supposed to be selling to these guys. Who are they? And you know who they are because you've been working with them, whether it was a carrier list or at Freight Waves, you've been working with, or as a freight broker. You understand that market really well.
Yeah, I had to build it from the ground up to survive with carrierless. And that's the reason why I know the pain of that and how difficult it is to figure out who's who and how do you really market to this huge expanse of companies. But if you're selling something for 20, 30, $40,000, you need freight brokers that are doing 10 million a year or more in gross to really be able to address your ICP.
Yep. So talk about Carrier Source, your other hat, the other hat that you wear. So what's going on? What is Carrier Source? What problem are you solving there? Who are you solving it for?
Yeah, so Carrier Source, they stood that website up about 5 years ago. And it was really about being the Yelp for transportation. It is about having free and fair online reviews, right? Brokers reviewing, carriers reviewing brokers, much like Yelp, right? And they've grown that over the years. They've 75, 80,000 reviews.
Oh, wow. That's fantastic.
Yeah. And still pouring money into building that, which
I'm
builds great
interviewing Rob
SEO.
Light in a few weeks. You connected me with him,
Yeah, exactly.
founder of Carrier Source.
Founder, CEO, and founder of Carrier Source. And so basically, they built this awesome engine, and you can go in and source carriers much like you could with carrierless, right, back in the day. You can do that, right? You can look at that. You can see their reviews, see if they're well reviewed or not, and do part of your due diligence with carriers. And we see a lot of carrier salespeople come in and use the website, do 400,000 sessions a month.
Wait, do 400,000 sessions a month of what? I mean, logging in?
Not even just hitting the website and conducting searches.
Oh, okay, not one group. So you're getting a ton of searches on that website.
Yeah. And that could be the same person coming in every single day. It's part of the forum. But it's a very active website. And we can identify with reverse IP lookups about 16,000 on average a month shippers that come in.
Ah,
Everyone from Target to Colgate to Tyson Foods, Campbell's Soup, all the way down to mid-market construction firms you never heard of. But they do flatbed all over the country, right? They build huge industrial refineries or commercial buildings, right? They do a lot of projects. They're building data centers, right? Yeah, you never heard of them, right? But they do a lot of business and a lot of brokerages. That's their bread and butter, right? And you can see where they're searching for trucks, what mode, dry van, reefer, flatbed, heavy haul.
oh, I love it. That's very valuable information.
Yeah. And you can get a signal every time that search happens, right? So you can see the raw data of what they're looking for. And you can also hit a button and produce all your pre-call research. So things that you can only dream of knowing about the company, AI can do in a matter of a couple minutes, right? It can estimate everything.
So that's intent data, and we'll get to that more. I want to get more in depth on that because I talk to Kara Smith Brown on the podcast every once in a while from Lead Coverage. And she's very enthusiastic about this idea of intent data. And the intent data is basically they're doing something online that shows that they're interested in doing something. And in this case, getting a truck. And we are a sales guy, I am too. And we're always looking for buying signals. So if I'm talking to you and you say something like, okay, what are your payment terms? You're like, oh, that's a buy signal. That's a buy signal. And if they say something like, if we did buy it, when would we be able to get it? That's a buy signal. What you're seeing on your website, the Carrier Source website, is a buy signal. Intent data.
Yeah, you're not putting down Facebook or ESPN to go search for carriers on Carrier Source unless you need capacity. And it's a very direct buying signal. And if you look at it B2C, right? If I go on branded bills and look for hats, I get advertisements for days on branded bills. So it's like that in a way.
B2C is very different than B2B, because B2C, if you look up, hey, I'd like to buy a Oklahoma football cap, you're going to say, okay, they know you're going to buy a cap in the next few days, right? They're saying, oh, Kevin's going to buy something long-term. They're like, no, he's looking. He's going to buy something. Price probably isn't a big deal. It's $20 or $30. He doesn't care. So they're going to hit you every hour until you buy. And by the way, it's the same with cars. If you go to a lot and go, oh, I'm just looking, they're like, no, you're not. You're going to buy a car in the next week.
I know, right?
So they hit you. Anyway, we've got a lot to cover today, Kev. So I wrote down 5 topics I wanted to talk to you about today. And again, the whole idea is that we're in this 3.5-year freight recession. And by the way, I've been at a few conferences recently, and people have said, maybe it's just this is the new model. This is, get used to it. I've also heard from you and others that maybe the margin compression that we're seeing is permanent. And it is not happening to everybody equally. I've just spoke to our friend, Spencer Tenney, a few weeks ago. And Spencer Tenney said, hey, I represent sellers who are being sold to larger freight brokerages, and not just freight brokerage, he does everything. And he said, what we're seeing is the people who are going to sell their business for a nice profit have specialized expertise, and they are getting fatter margins. They aren't getting the 12% margin that you say might be average. The guys at the top who are growing probably are getting fatter margins, gross margins, and also they're probably running their businesses more efficient. They have more volume. They have more tech. They're making good money.
The richest are the niches. The richest are in the niches. And you get fatter margins when you do things that no one else can do. And some of that, if you look at the liquid tanker market, which Spencer's done a couple deals with those guys, I know private equity likes that too, because you can't just get into the tanker business. You can't just get into certain types of businesses. It's difficult and no one wants to do it.
Yeah. So I guess what we're going to be talking about today is the essential strategies that you've uncovered from your travels. And I've heard some of the same stuff on what you need to do. And I think the top 50, the top 1,000 are doing it. They're already there. They don't have to. They're always looking for ways to get faster, better, cheaper, of course. But the advantage they have is usually that they have the money to invest. They can make a mistake. For small companies, you say, oh, we bought a TMS. We can't afford for it to be $1 million more to implement. There's just, that means we're out of business. I can't, by the way, when we talk about freight fraud, one bad shipment puts a lot of companies out of business. So the larger companies, they have a mulligan, right? If things don't go quite right, they're like, oh, we made a mistake. No big deal. We're on to the next one. Where the smaller guys, and I'll say the bottom 20,000 freight brokers, and this applies to other industries that we're in, they don't have the leeway to make mistakes, and they don't have the big investment dollars to make.
You're exactly right. You don't. I've seen brokerages go out of business because of a load stolen or 2 loads stolen. Really puts you out, especially if you lose a customer in the mix of that, right, then you're really up the creek without a paddle. I think it hurts the big players too, right? Because they become, if you don't defend, you become a huge target.
Yeah. Yeah. More is expected from you. So I talked to Ben Gordon from Cambridge Capital probably a month ago. He was on the podcast, and he said something about the top 50 freight brokers being a big chunk of all revenue. So I called you a few days after that. I said, hey, do you have stats on that? And you came back, and I'm going to read these out loud. The top 1,000 have over 80% of the volume. So there's 25,000 freight brokers. It used to be 31,000 at the peak during the pandemic. So the top 1,000 have over 80%. The top 100 have 2/3 of all freight brokerage business. The top 20 have half. That's in this area that we just described, this top 1,000 are growing, and one of the ways they're growing is through consolidation, but they're also growing organically. And they are not. I spent the last few weeks at a few conferences. I was at the IANA conference out in Long Beach. Fantastic conference. Thank you so much, IANA. That was at Long Beach. And then last week I was at the Automotive Logistics and Supply Chain Conference here in Plymouth, Michigan, not too far from me. Talked to a lot of the bigger companies, and they say, oh yeah, the margin compression, maybe it's here forever, but it's not hitting them the same. They said the margin compression, that's for the other guys, the guys who are 1,001 and beyond.
Yeah, it is a very top heavy industry, and they can the bigger players. I think typically they're the run of lean margins in the grand scheme of things, but so they're not really getting hit as hard because they have some sort of scale. It's hard to scale up in logistics, but they do have that scale, and they have buying power, as in relationships with hiring carriers, right?
Yeah.
So
You also get to a place where you say, hey, I need somebody who I can work with on every continent, and I need them to have a certain scale and a certain name. It's a lot easier to make that decision. And then when you go to that company that's one of the top 10 logistics companies in the world, they're going to make their margins. That's how they got to be that big. So they have a specialized expertise that allows them to get a little higher gross margin. But then on top of that, and we're going to talk about some of the efficiencies right now, but this is some of the stuff that can help you get more efficient and get to that place where you're surviving, as we wrote in the title.
yeah, you have to pick your niche, right? I think one of the
Pick your niche. We did a podcast called the riches are in the niches. I always get that wrong. And it was just that. It was specialized expertise. So if you say, all we do is oil field stuff in Texas, and we do it better than everyone else. We got the specialized equipment. We got guys who are knowledgeable of it. I know you did that a long time ago. And we do it better than anyone, or cross-border cold chain, or whatever it is that you say, we have a niche and no one else, not very many other companies can do what we do, and we get a little more for it.
get a little bit more for it, you're more profitable, and guess who comes knocking at a certain point?
Right. The big boys to buy
The
you
big
out.
boys that buy you out. You get a better exit. And I think over the last couple of years, I think one of the fastest growing niches, or at least in everybody's vocabulary and thoughts, are US Mexico. US Mexico, everyone's focused on nearshoring and beefing up their cross-border operations. And that was my first brokerage, that's what we did 10, 15 years ago. And we did it well. We did it really well. And they're great margins, man. Great margins, very complex. No one
I remember
wanted to deal with
talking
it.
to you about this. Maybe it was actually on the podcast, but I remember you saying that we did a ton of stuff from, I think, Oklahoma and Texas down to Mexico and back, and a lot for the oil fields. And you said, we're killing it. And then one day the owner came in and said, we need to diversify and get into some other industries. And you said it was like really difficult because you weren't experts at it. And
Didn't know anything about vans.
you were a bit competing on price alone because you weren't the experts. And you said, I kind of learned a lesson there.
It is. You stick with in that niche, US Mexico cross border. It's growing every year, right? You'll never tap out of that
And
niche.
it's not as easy as some other stuff either. And I
You
think,
see all the bigger players who aren't heavy into the cross border, now they're getting heavy into it. A lot of them are going to do it organically and fail miserably at it because they're just not going to have the time and focus of it. And they're going to start acquiring people who do it really well. So if you're doing cross border right now and that's all you're doing and that's your niche, man, your company's getting more valuable by.
so it could be a geographic niche, it could be a specialized equipment. If say you're a trucking company, say all we have is the specialized equipment, and we really have some really happy customers, and all we do is blank. So anyway, I think I've said this many times on the podcast. I'll put a link to our old episode. I think we did during COVID, but it never ends. The riches are in the niches. You have to get, as Spencer Tenney calls it, specialized expertise that you can charge a premium for. And whatever that is, there's a million little niches that you can pick, and that's going to make you so much more margin today and potentially make it easier for you to exit later. Anyway, next I want to talk to you about something. Last week, was it last week? Yeah, I think it was last Monday. So last week we were talking, you and I had a quick meeting with Russell Jones. I saw him at the Intermodal Association North America. We had dinner a few nights, and fascinating new company. He's got private fleet net zero. Again, he recognized that 45% of the trucks on the road are private fleet. And most private fleets, I think it's 80% of those drive home empty. And if you have a private fleet, they tend to be very focused on the front haul, the forward haul. They're a lot less interested in the back haul because their top priority is I bought dedicated capacity to make sure I never miss that delivery to Walmart or to Target or where automotive, whatever they're doing. But we have a problem here with a lot of brokers not making the kind of margins they do. And by the way, what Russ also noticed is the top 50 companies already are doing this in a lot of cases. And he said they're getting a big chunk of their capacity under market because the private fleets are willing to do backhauls. They'll do it even below market. However, they want precision. They don't want to go out of there. If you say, I go from Chicago to Dallas, now I want to go back Dallas to Chicago, say, hey, how about you stop in Peoria? Maybe that works, but maybe that's just far enough where they say no. They want precision. They need a guarantee that they're going to be home, that they're never going to miss a front haul. And they don't want difficult freight. They don't want to deal with shady brokers. So basically, he's put together, I'll call it Match.com, matching brokers to private fleet capacity, backhauls, for cheaper. Again, 10, 20% cheaper, 30% in some cases. And it's also good for the environment. So a lot of brands are saying, yeah, we should probably not have backhauls. That's bad for us. If you're a big brand, especially if you're publicly traded, you have to explain to the SEC your emissions and why you're not getting better. So anyway, enough my blather about private fleet net zero. That is something that the big guys are already doing. And it's just one of the things that you have to start looking at is how do we assume the margins are never going to get fat. You have to get more efficient. You have to buy better.
Yeah, I love the idea. It showed me in action. It just makes perfect sense to me because I used to work with a few private fleets, and you're exactly right. It's precision, right? If you think about it, they're going to load up $100,000, $200,000 worth of retail merchandise in a truck. So basically, if it's 100,000, it's $50,000 of gross profit for them, right? To make sure that those shelves are stocked. And if they hit a location and basically they don't get loaded, or it takes 6 hours to load, and that turnaround time to get back to restock, you're talking large numbers of that merchandise in. So whether they get paid or not, I wouldn't say it's immaterial, but they won't stop for anything. Drop and hook. And to go back, and I just try to figure this out, but it was so much effort and work to define a private fleet and then to match up everything. If that's automatically done for you, and that legwork is out and you can match, it makes perfect sense because it is market value usually under.
Yeah. And keep in mind, Russ is the founder of Cargo Chief. So he's already been doing this. They've already been getting capacity for companies. And in fact, I asked him, why isn't this just part of Cargo Chief? And he said, they're one of the owners of Private Fleet Net Zero. But the private fleets now recognize, hey, driving back empty isn't good for the environment. And if we want, most larger companies now have some sort of sustainability goal. So if you say, hey, we're making an extra $1,000 on this and can make the claim that we're no longer having empty miles, which is bad for the environment, bad for business. This takes potentially trucks off the road, which is a good thing for all of us. Anyway, I'll make sure. I just interviewed Russ. I interviewed him at the IANA Intermodal Association conference in Long Beach. I'll put a link to that episode in the show notes. So if anyone wants to hear it, I'll put a link so you can reach out and talk to Russ. So we talked about you should have a niche. Of course you should have a niche. Specialized expertise. Secondly, consider tools like Private Fleet Net Zero that let you get in on capacity that you don't have. That's less expensive. Number three, just interviewed Bill Driegert from DAT and the Convoy platform. So Convoy was a company. They created fantastic technology. I think they raised the bar for this whole industry with their tech. They had some issues. They zigged when they should have zagged. They went out of business, but again, they were a meteor. Flexport bought up that Convoy platform, grew it, and then sold it to DAT. And I had just interviewed Bill, and I'll put a link to that episode too. Bill said that the average cost per load, meaning what it costs you to get a truck and get that load done, is about $150. Plug in the the Convoy platform, which is just basically an API if you're a DAT customer, I believe. And you can knock that cost down $15, $20 instead of $150. So you're saving 90%. And I think, again, some of the bigger companies already have that kind of tech. They go, yeah, we don't need that. They're probably already working with that or maybe not, but they already have that kind of capability because they can afford to spend a fortune on tech. Not everybody can. This is a fantastic opportunity for struggling freight brokerages to say, hey, can we make an extra $100 per load? That's a lot of money.
It is. And then cost to cover.
Yeah, cost to cover. Cost per load, yeah.
Cost per load, cost for cover. Cost to cover is embedded in the cost per load because usually that's a good rule of thumb. It hasn't really changed all that much over the years. You make $150 in gross margin, right? Costs you $150 to operate the load. You're at zero, right?
Yeah, there's those hidden costs.
Yeah, the hidden costs, right? You cover it, right? That's a cost. You track it, you manage it, you get the paperwork from the driver, the POD or the BOL, you build that out, you get the money. It's going to cost you $150 per load. So yeah, if you can shrink that down by any amount whatsoever, it's all about profitability.
Yeah, and we're seeing these margins being compressed for a long time, and they might never be coming back up. And I've used the analogy that at one time you paid $200 to make a stock trade, and then one day, like the internet guys came in and said, "Hey, we'll do it for $10," and then I said, "We'll do it for $7." Then at some point, said, "We'll do it for free." It's like, how is this happening? Maybe the same thing's happening in our business, where that we're going to have a much lower price, and it's going to be transparency. We're going to know I charge you $30 for every shipment, and we're tech enabled. You can see that kind of happening, and not for everybody. This is a massive market, and they're going to always have people who want something more specialized than that. I do believe, I talked to C.H. Robinson's president recently, and he said, number one feedback we get, even with all of our tech, is that people like our people. And I was like, that makes sense.
But service business, that'll never go away. It will not go away. People buy from people. But the processes behind it is, I think we're seeing that, especially this year in 2025. We are seeing that load costs, we talk about margin compression, right? It's a, it's a, it's a structural change, right? The more efficient we get, the more margin compression we should see. And I think with Convoy and I believe Outgo,
They go by the Convoy Platform, not just
yeah, Convoy Platform, right? So Convoy Platform, DAT Purchasing, Convoy Platform, Trucker Tools, and I believe Outgo, the financial piece, right? You're seeing that. You're seeing Highway Triumph come together to do that. Truck Stop doing it, and think I think it's accelerating that world of margin compression, bringing your costs down.
By the way, I say by the way too much. I'm trying to start saying something else. Stockbrokers would always say, it's a people business. It's relationships. Kev's my buddy. He comes in. I have a nice office, glass door. It's beautiful here. I talk about hunting and fishing and football games. And then he gives me $250 for these trades. And he says, but he doesn't mind because we have a relationship. At some point, Kevin said, yeah, that's cool. We can still be friends, but I'm doing $7 a trade. And your glass office is nice, but I know I was paying for it.
Yeah, yeah. You gotta be a people person. You have to have that friendship, that rapport, but you also have the right price.
The business evaporated as it once was, the stock brokerage business, and what they all became is financial planners, investment counselors, whatever you say, who took 1%. And they were also aligned. So if I'm managing the $20 million that Kevin has in the market, then I get 1%. And Kevin's, yeah, it's only 200 grand. What's that mean to me?
And you're not calling me every day and say, oh, we should buy this and sell this because I'm going to make $200 on each churn.
You're not churning because we're aligned.
Yeah.
So anyway, we first talked about niches. You need that specialized expertise that lets you get a bigger margin. Second, we talked about tools like private fleet net zero, buying capacity, better capacity that is less likely to steal from you, better drivers, fewer accidents, better trucks, and it's cheaper. You can't go wrong. We talked about the DAT Convoy Platform, just cutting the price 90% on cost to cover, or cost per load, whatever you want to call that. Number 4, we already touched on a little bit. There's tools like Cargo Chief, Parade, Neutral. I think Highway gets into that. Talk about what those companies do for us, Kev.
Yeah, that goes more to maybe cost to cover as part of that equation of cost per load. It's bringing the brokers and the carriers and the shippers all into more visibility, better able to source carriers, build out your network, manage your network of carriers that you already have, and be able to. And I think AI works wonderful when you have a lot of data, right? So being able to optimize your carrier network saves so much time and money, right? It dramatically decreases that cost to cover.
I think when you talk about all those tools, again, Cargo Chief. Now, did Neutral just get bought?
By Highway.
Yes, so Neutral got bought by Highway. So Neutral, Parade, Cargo Chief, they'll say, we can help you work with the carriers you like more often. And it's also all about the vetting, so we have less cargo theft, less freight fraud. That is a cost, but we don't typically capture it. This can save you 2 to 5% on your cost to cover. It makes life a lot easier. You also say, look, I've been working with Kevin for a while. He's one of the top carriers. I remember experiencing this when I was a 3PL. We would have a carrier come meet us and say, how we doing? And I'd say, great. We'd be looking at their metrics. My team would all be there. And they'd say, what's the chance of us getting more business from you? And I was like, I don't know, why not? And you can give us the money for the lanes. And then the next week, I would ask my team, hey, are we using them more? No. Why not? I don't know. And it was just because we didn't have a tool that helped us do it. And so having a team that all says, we want to work with XYZ carrier more, good, but then the heat of the battle begins and somehow you forget all about them. That's why you need a tool like Cargo Chief, Parade, and Neutral/Highway.
Yeah, you think about it as a person in the heat of the battle, right? You can't multitask like that to be able to recall everything and sync up. You're trying to figure out your next fire, your next task. And it just becomes unwieldy. And I think tools, I think as those tools implement more AI into the process, it can multitask. It can do a lot of different things at once that bring you to where you need to be. And it's very important.
Yes, Kev. So one other thing I want to talk to you about is number 5 is intent data. We started our conversation about intent data. Talk about how brokers can make their business better using intent data.
So they can make their business better. It's really all about being at the right place at the right time, right? And that's what sells a lot of life is, right? Be in the right place at the right time. So if you're making 50 calls a day or 50 pieces of outreach, you want to define the 50 that have an interest right now and be able to describe that the interest, right? That they need flatbeds in Little Rock, Arkansas, or they need dry vans in LA, and tailor your message to that.
How do I get to the people who want that? You talked about it. So carrier source, you're a source of intent data. Please explain. And how do I can I work with you guys on that? Is that something I can get an account and start saying, yeah, if carrier source is going to lead me to new biz?
Yes, yeah, you can get account. We have subscriptions for this to access the data. You get real-time signals sent to you whenever shippers are searching, and you get whatever they're searching for. And get back to dry vans in Dallas or somewhere Mission, Kansas for reefers. And we also provide some research that tell you why they're doing that. It's good information if you know why they're doing it or likely reasons why. And we have the AI bot that or AI agent that does that. Gives you the context around it. Then you can build your pitch, right? You can build a platform to where you can have a really good conversation with somebody who is searching for a certain item, and you can come in with a great solution for it.
I think there's starting to be intent data in a lot of places. So there's different levels of intent data. So I have a website. People come to my website and look at stuff. And then I can say, oh, okay, I saw Kevin Hill hit my website 6 times in the last week. Now I'm going to do some cold calls, right? I'm going to do some cold outreach. Why aren't I calling Kevin who's visited my website 6 times? And that's intent data that, by the way, there's all sorts of tools now. I don't remember the names of all of them, but there's all sorts of tools that'll tell you who's hitting your website. And they'll give you their email address, they'll tell you what they make and where they work, all the whole thing. That's really important. I think there's also third-party intent data like what you guys have. Very valuable because it's saying, hey, Target is looking for this lane. And then you go, oh my God, they're looking. Apparently they can't find it with whoever they're working with. They're on carrier source for the last couple days asking for this obscure lane that we happen to do every day.
And that's what you want as a salesperson, right? You want to talk to people who are looking, who are searching, who you can provide a solution for. And instead of making 50 cold calls, we're like, I hope.
Call the people who are already looking for that.
Yeah, I hope.
Kev, it's crazy when we all use scrolling around on different social media. Do you ever think to yourself, just think about something, and then it's on your Instagram feed or on your YouTube feed, and you go, I just thought about it, and somehow it landed on my calendar. I landed on my feed. And I think AI basically is able to say, okay, these 10 things that he looked in indicates that maybe the 11th one is most likely to be this. That's why we're going to put it on his feed. Anyway, let's wrap this bad boy up, Kev. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. So I'm talking to my friend Kevin Hill. We're talking about the Margin Compression Playbook, the essential strategies for brokerage survival with my friend Kevin Hill. And we talked about 5 things. These are the 5 strategies. And probably there's 10 more, but we only went over these 5. So the first one is specialize. The riches are in the niches, and get some specialized expertise. That's the moat that is going to get you fatter margins. And also, when it's time to sell, you're going to have something that is better fit for a larger company that wants to buy you out. Number 2, we talked about private fleet net zero. Again, this is just a great tool. It's 45% of the capacity on the road is private fleets. And 80% of the time, they're driving home empty. Bad for the environment. They measure empty miles. They don't want empty miles, but they don't want to take risks working with just anyone. So they work with Private Fleet Net Zero, who guarantees the payments, by the way. It's a great way to get capacity for 10, 20, 30% cheaper. Better trucks. These are new trucks. If your brand is on the side, you don't have a 20-year-old truck. They're not dented. The drivers have fewer accidents. Everything about this deal is better, better, better. So Private Fleet Net Zero is a great way to go. Number 3, we talked about DAT and the Convoy Platform. So the Convoy Platform lets you cover that load for $15 or $20 as opposed to the normal $150. Now, if you're a big guy and you say, we already have the tech to do that, but that's not the other 24,500 companies. Great situation with DAT. And number 4, we talked about Cargo Chief, Parade, and Neutral, which has recently got bought by Highway. And again, another tool for letting you get your cost per load down, be more efficient, take some more money home. So if you got to stick with a lower margin, you got to be more efficient. If you don't have those tools, you aren't going to be more efficient. Last but not least, we talked about intent data. So there is intent data. It's a buzzword that we're hearing more and more, and it's everywhere. People visited your website today while you were busy doing cold outreach to people who don't know you. And also, there's third-party intent data with companies like Carrier Source. So you call Kev. Kev says, yeah, I'll tell you exactly what these people are searching for. Lanes that they are obviously, you don't Google or go to Carrier Source about lanes that you have no problem covering. These are the ones they can't cover or they're unhappy with their current provider. So intent data like that is just a slam dunk. Anyway, enough of my blather. Kev put a big old bow on this one. Final thoughts on the topic.
I think 2025 has been the year of margin compression. You're going into the third year. It's the third year of this new normal, and the more people talk about new normal, the quicker the ending will get here. I've seen it over a couple of cycles. Whenever people say whether it's high or low, new normal, it's about to turn. Hopefully, that's my optimist phase of that. But yeah, margin compression. The more technology, the more efficiencies. The slimmer the margins in any industry. So there's the cost side of that, the revenue producing side of that, and it's time to get smart about that because everything's evolving right now very quickly.
Yeah. We're in a place we didn't expect to be during COVID. It seemed now again, COVID is very difficult on a personal level for many of us, but on the business front, it just felt like money's raining down on our industry and it'll never end. And it ended clearly, and now it seems like the struggle will never end. Yeah, but it's not for everybody. The struggle is not for the top 50. It's not for the top 100. It's not even for the top 1,000. It's the other guys. That's what we're talking to today. I think everybody else has to get the tools and the capability of the big guys if they want to continue to play.
Exactly right. You got to have it's a tech play these days.
Yep. Kev, I'll put a link to your LinkedIn profile, link to your website, any of the links you and your go-to-market team give me, I'll put those in the show notes. I'll make sure I also put a link to Carrier Source. And I think I did mention I'll put a link to my interview with Russ Jones. I just interviewed Russ last week. And I'll even put the link to The Riches Are in the Niches, the episode I did with you a few years ago. Kev, thank you. Oh, by the way, before I forget, what conferences will you be going to?
Broker Carrier Summit, of course, down in Orlando.
You don't want to miss that. It's in Orlando what's the date?
October 28th through the 30th. So come out. If you haven't registered, do that. I'm always pitching the Broker Carrier Summit.
Yeah, I talked to Dan Lindsay the other day, you're the founder, and I'm going to interview him hopefully in the next week or so before the conference. And that is turned into such a go-to for so many people. It's a great place for connecting with carriers. If you're a broker and you want to connect with carriers. And I think there's so many relationships that are built there.
Deals get done on the floor. And it's fantastic to see.
It's got a different vibe than other conferences. It is not so. It's, hey, let's meet and greet. Let's get to know each other. Let's do some business.
Yeah. And it helps with eliminating fraud.
Yeah, you don't get defrauded by the guy you had a beer with at the Broker Carrier Summit. Dan said to me, yeah, we keep the bad guys out. I go, do you think the bad guys actually want to go to a conference called the Broker Carrier Summit? That they're trying to avoid that. What other conferences we see you at this year?
Technovations.
And where is that and when?
I think Phoenix in November.
All right. Very nice. Very nice.
Yeah.
I'm going to two conferences. I'll be at the Broker Carrier Summit, and then I'm going to the CSCMP that is near Washington, D.C. next week. And I'm also going to the Trimble Conference down in New Orleans. That's just going to be fantastic. I always enjoy that one. Anyway, Kev, thank you so much for taking the time. It is always a pleasure talking to you.
Same, Joe. Always a pleasure. Can't wait for the next time I drop by Logistics of Logistics.
Let's not wait too long. And thank all of you for listening to my podcast. Your support's very much appreciated. I know I always say it, but I truly mean it. Your support's very much appreciated. Until next time, onward and upward.
You have been listening to the Logistics of Logistics podcast, where we engage with leaders in the logistics and supply chain community. If you like what you hear, please subscribe, hit the like button, and leave us a nice review on Apple or Spotify or wherever else you listen. Also, please check out our videos on YouTube and connect with us on LinkedIn. We're very big on LinkedIn. And you can also reach us on the logisticsoflogistics.com, our website.